And the gameplay, I guess I'll go ahead and touch on the gameplay as well. FF6, in my opinion, hit the sweet spot. I admittedly am one of those people who like turn-based battles. I'm kind of weird like that. But turn-based battle by itself is kind of a generic term. It can refer to a lot of things. In FF6's case, it was ATB, active turn-based, where the counter's always ticking unless you're in the middle of actively doing something when it pauses for a moment, and then the animation's done, or the selection is done, and even that depends on your settings. Now, I'm not going into the math on that. Point being, it was a nice sweet spot because the battle was still moving. The people who didn't like turn-based combat didn't mind as much because it was smooth, it was quick, and you could blow through it without any real issues. And the people who like turn-based battles like me liked it because it was still involved enough that you could really be clever with it, and you could really pull off some interesting strategies if you felt like it. And if you didn't have to. It didn't require every turn to be carefully calculated like some games do. And leveling, while I'm on the subject, as I have hinted at before, I am a huge opponent of grind. And let me define grind really quick, if you don't mind. Grind is when you're playing an RPG. I'll just use RPGs. You're doing a thing, and it's awesome, and you're having fun, and you hit a wall. You have reached a boss or a point in the game where you just cannot proceed. It is not feasible to keep going. You have to go back and gain 30 levels, or 10 levels, or 2 more AP levels on your materia, or maybe you need another spell from your magicite, or maybe you need to junction a new GF. Whatever. You need something that you don't have, and you need to go back and mindlessly level. And I stress that mindless part, because there's no thought process gone into grinding until you're good enough to continue. It is artificial padding. It's like technobabble over in Star Trek. The only reason technobabble exists is to pad out an episode. It doesn't add anything, it doesn't subtract... Well, it actually does subtract anything, but that's a whole other discussion. It doesn't add anything. It doesn't make the script better. It doesn't make the episode better. It's just people spouting nonsense and wasting our time. And that's what grind is. Nonsense that wastes our time. And the less grind in a game, the better. I do have more tolerance for grind than some of my friends, like, say, Pax over here. He's not actually here, but... But FF6 didn't have any grind. None. You could play through that whole game and just be playing the game, and you would never hit a wall. You would be challenged at the right points, and you would breeze through the right points. You would feel strong when you were supposed to, you'd feel weak when you were supposed to, and I like that. Admittedly, there's something to be said for blowing through a game at level 99, but I prefer it when you get through a game and you reach a boss who, in story terms, who in the lore of the setting, is supposed to be powerful, and he is. He's actually difficult, like the FF4 DS remake, which upped the difficulty on the game significantly. Did it mostly at the points where it made sense. When you fight Golbez in the Dwarven Castle, whose name I can't think of, I don't think it actually has a name, the Dwarven Castle in the Underworld, he was hard. He was nightmarishly hard. I had to refight that battle like 20 times, and I wasn't not leveling, mind you. And it was awesome! He should be hard! He's Golbez! And so, if you're playing FF6 and not grinding and not extra leveling and you're just playing through, you will be challenged when you should be. When you hit Atma, or whatever he's called in the remake, on the floating continent, when you hit the floating continent, you will be like, oh god, and it will feel as dramatic and impacting as it should. And I love that. And it wasn't too far this way, it wasn't too much of a wall, so you had to go back and grind. It wasn't too much this way. It wasn't so easy you could just blow through it without thinking about it. Unless you're using the Vanish X Zone trick, but we'll not talk about that. And what else is there to say? Every aspect of Final Fantasy VI was a thing of beauty. It was perfect. I'm sorry, I hate to use that word. There have been a lot of really good games over these years. I've been waiting for FF6 to be supplanted all this time. I've been trying. I have been playing all these wonderful games. There are games that have reached the zero circle, which I probably shouldn't even explain what that means. I have a weird brain. Zero is the top category here, with 0, 0, and then 0, 1, and then 0, 2, and then 0, 8, and 1, 6. Anyways, there have been games that have hit the zero circle, that have gotten to the best of the best of the best. Sir. But nothing has ever really reached FF6. It did everything right, and it did nothing wrong, and I cannot complain about that game. You know what? The only thing I could complain about FF6 is that it has not received a proper remake like FF everything else has 4 through 1. I should say, because they never really redid 5 properly either. I'll be honest with that. It was a good remake, but and they did do that great Game Boy Advance remake. I'll give it that. The sound quality was lowered, and that's basically it. They added the one extra dungeon. That was nice. And they cleaned up the dialogue, which was beautiful, so you could really, really feel the characters now. But FF6 was the best, and nothing has ever reached it, and I keep waiting for something to reach that pinnacle, and it never has. So, bringing this all round circle here. I never actually started my review with this. See, this is an idea I've had recently about doing my what to pay thing for games that are already out, for games that have been out, for older games, SNES games, Game Boy Advance games, whatever, old PC games. And how much would I pay if that game, as is, came out right now? Because as I've hinted before, what really defines a good game, a truly good game, is that I can go back and play it right now. 18 years later, 20 years later, however long it's been, and enjoy it. Maybe not as much as I first did, because you never get the same enjoyment as that very first time, but you get my point. I still go back and enjoy the heck out of this game. I would pay $100 for Final Fantasy VI if it came out right now. I'm not kidding. Nothing approaches that game to me. And maybe never will, I don't know. So, that's probably the highest rating I'm ever going to give anything. $100. I would prefer it if it came out on the handheld, but to segue this a little bit, they've been thinking about doing FF5 and FF6 remakes on the 3DS in the same vein that they did FF3 and FF4 on the DS. Full remake, full redoing of the game. It's the same general story, but they add to it and they just basically completely rewrite the game from the ground up. And I probably would pay $100 for that. I would go and buy a 3DS because I don't own a 3DS for that game. In fact, there are something like 10 games for 3DS. All told, that will be out. Not like one of them is out right now. I'm sorry, 2 now. And 10 games is borderline justifying the expense of a new console. It's like right on the edge there. The fact that, I guess there's the camera. It's right on the edge there. But FF6, properly remade, properly done, like they did FF4, like they did FF1, I would pay for that out the ass. I would go without food for a week to pay for that. So that's my review of the best game of all time.